Welcome back, my friends, to your recaps! The movie begins after 3 years after a global catastrophe where strange creatures known as Reapers appeared on Earth. These creatures attacked and killed humans, wiping out entire cities. The reasons behind their emergence remain unknown. However, the Reapers were unable to climb mountains or reach high altitudes, particularly those exceeding 8,000 feet. The surviving humans either lived far from the Reapers' reach or managed to escape quickly. Survivors marked lines on the ground to indicate danger zones, and crossing these lines meant facing deadly risks. The story revolves around a young boy named Hunter, who lives on a mountain called Rocky. The mountain's elevation is 7,740 feet, making it dangerously close to the danger zone, just 260 feet below the safety line. Hunter, being naturally adventurous, explores the nearby areas and observes his surroundings. During one of his excursions, he sees children playing in the distance, but suddenly hears the sound of approaching creatures. This prompts him to rush back to the mountain peak. In a tense moment, a Reaper chases Hunter, roaring menacingly, but he manages to cross the safety line, beyond which the creature cannot follow. Hunter returns to the village called Lost, home to about 193 people living atop the mountain. When Hunter arrives home, his father, Will, notices his anxiety and asks what happened. Hunter admits to crossing the line and explains that he just wanted to see the people living on the other mountains. Will, aware that the creatures are relatively dormant at the moment, acknowledges his son's recklessness, but speaks to him calmly, explaining the dangers and asking him not to repeat the act. Later, Will goes hunting with his companion, Kitty. Together, they manage to catch a deer. While carrying the deer back, Kitty asks about Hunter. Will explains that Hunter crossed the line because he was looking at Red Rock Village, where there are children his age. Kitty empathizes with Hunter, noting that as the only child in the village of Lost, it's natural for him to feel this way. However, Will suspects that Hunter might also want to visit the place where he last saw his mother. Later, we are introduced to Nina, Will's neighbor, who is a physicist. Nina constantly conducts experiments on a part of the creature's bodies, which they use for self-defense. She frequently fires at it, trying to discover a weakness in these beings, often using her weapon's ammunition for her experiments. The next morning, Will is lost in his memories of his late wife, Tara. Through his thoughts, we learn that Tara once went on a trip with Nina, crossing the safety line, but never returned. Since then, Will has been living alone, raising his son Hunter by himself. Raising Hunter has been a challenging task for Will, especially since Hunter suffers from a serious illness that affects his breathing. Hunter requires a special device and oxygen tanks to survive. Will changes Hunter's oxygen tank regularly, but the problem is that they are down to the last one. This pushes Will to consider traveling to Boulder City to obtain more oxygen tanks. The next day, Will teaches Hunter how to farm and hunt so he can learn to be self-reliant. That same day happens to be Hunter's birthday. Since Will doesn't have any money, he trades for a meal of macaroni and cheese. When he brings it home, Hunter is thrilled. He asks his father to turn on the radio, but Will refuses, explaining that they must conserve electricity during the winter since they rely on solar power. Later, Will sits with Kitty, his hunting companion, and they talk about the lives they once had. Kitty asks him what he would be doing if life were normal. Will responds, "I'd probably be watching hockey games with Tara's father. I didn't even like sports much, but I miss spending time with them." That night, Hunter has a breathing crisis and needs another oxygen tank. Since none are available, Will is forced to give him an injection that stabilizes his breathing for 5 days. Determined, Will decides to visit Nina and asks her to join him on the trip to Boulder. Nina is the only person who has survived the Reaper's attacks and has extensive knowledge about them through her research, making her the best choice for this journey. During their conversation, we learn that Nina was the one who convinced Tara to cross the safety line with her to visit her laboratory, leading to Tara's death. This has caused Will to harbor deep resentment toward Nina. Despite this, he asks her to join him on the trip to Boulder for her expertise. Nina warns him that the path to Boulder is dangerous and filled with Reapers, but Will insists that he knows a safe route. Nina tells Will that she is well versed in maps and insists that there is no safe route to Boulder. She explains that all paths to the city require staying below the safety line, and she is confident of this because her lab is located there. However, Will insists that he has no choice but to go because Hunter needs the oxygen tanks, or he will die. Nina refuses to accompany Will, saying she doesn't want to risk her life. She adds that she was lucky to survive the creatures once and doesn't want to tempt fate again. Will, angry, accuses her of being responsible for Tara's death and demands that she join him to repay her debt. He tells her he knows a mountain route that only requires crossing the line twice, and adds, "I know you want to go down there to test killing the creatures." Nina reminds Will that Boulder is 2,000 feet below the safety line and warns, "Even if we make it there safely, the creatures will be waiting for us. One creature alone is enough to kill us." Will responds, "I know all of this, but I don't have another choice," and storms off. After Will leaves, Nina sits alone and recalls the attack she and Tara faced. Eventually, she decides to join Will on the journey. Will informs a neighbor to stay with Hunter during his absence, and then visits his friend Tim to gather weapons and ammunition capable of slowing the creatures down. Later, Kitty confronts Will, insisting she won't let him go on such a dangerous journey alone. She asks Tim for a weapon, but faces resistance from Will, who tries to convince her not to come because of the risks. However, Kitty is adamant, saying, "You need someone to protect you, and I can't stand living here anymore. I want to go down for a while." Despite Will's protests, Kitty remains firm. At the same time, Nina objects to Kitty joining the journey and says, "You've never faced a creature before and have no idea how dangerous this journey is. You've never seen a creature tear a person apart or bullets fail to stop them. Even if you shoot one in the face, it will still kill you." Nina tries to scare Kitty into staying behind, but Kitty remains unfazed and insists on coming along. Before they leave, Will says goodbye to Hunter and promises to return. For the three of them, Will, Nina, and Kitty, set off on their journey. Nina brings a special device resembling a compass, capable of detecting creatures in the area. When they reach the safety line, Nina activates the device, confirming that there are no creatures nearby, assuring them that the path is safe for now. During their journey, the group comes across an abandoned military vehicle. Will decides to search it for ammunition or anything useful. Kitty manages to find an attachment for her weapon, thanks to her reasonable experience with firearms. Meanwhile, Nina examines the area for signs of creatures. A heated argument breaks out between Nina and Kitty when Nina says, "You're unnecessary here. You only joined because you're attracted to Will." Kitty, angered, retaliates, and the argument escalates into a physical fight until Will intervenes and breaks it up. Ignoring the incident, Nina continues walking ahead. As they proceed, the group hears strange noises around them, only to discover that it's just a herd of horses. They're surprised to see horses in the area, but decide to keep moving. They reach a skiing area called Vista, located at an altitude of 7,612 feet, getting closer to the 8,000-foot safety mark. Suddenly, Nina's special compass indicates the presence of a nearby creature. She spots movement among the trees and sees a beam of light emanating from the creature, causing alarm among the group. Will suggests they run quickly to cross the safety line, but Nina believes they won't make it in time. She decides to use the nearby cable car as it would get them to the line faster. Kitty, however, distrusts the plan and goes in a different direction, while Will chooses to trust Nina and starts operating the cable car. Nina stays on the ground to buy Will time as the creature draws closer. Frightened, Kitty fires a projectile at the creature from a distance. Although the projectile falls short, it explodes nearby, temporarily slowing the creature down. As it approaches them, they manage to cross the 8,000-foot mark just in time. Unfortunately, the cable snaps, and they all fall back below the line. Forced to run again, they barely make it across the line just as the creature retreats. Exhausted, they find a small house at an altitude of 8,200 feet and decide to rest there for the night. While talking, Kitty asks, "How can we get rid of the creatures?" Nina responds, "They appeared suddenly all over the world, which left us no time to study them or figure out how to kill them. The problem is that they wiped out 95% of humanity within a month, and their only goal seems to be killing humans. I wish I could find answers to my question." That night, as Nina and Kitty sleep, Will recalls his conversation with his wife, Tara, about her decision to join Nina on her journey beyond the line. He had tried to warn her about the dangers and accused Nina of being more concerned about gaining fame than anything else. However, Tara had trusted that Nina had a solution to defeat the creatures. Kitty asks, "Will, what's the difference if I go down now or after a year? Hunter's oxygen tanks will run out either way." Will responds, "The difference is that you'll live with me for an extra year, and for me, that's worth trying." The next morning, they continue their journey and arrive at a mine in the mountains. Will explains his plan. We'll walk through the tunnel to the other side, where it will be safe at an elevation of 8,023 feet, about 12 miles from Boulder. We'll descend from the 9th level to the 8th level, but be careful. Anything below the 8th level is a danger zone. Nina cautiously asks, "How are you sure the other side is at 8,023 feet? The tunnel might have curves that take us back below the line." Will avoids answering, making Nina realize he hasn't been entirely honest and that the tunnel isn't completely safe. They'll be passing under dangerous zones. She presses him. "How far below the line will we be?" Will responds, "About 231 feet. Nina, frustrated, says, "You should have told us about the risks before we left the village." Will replies, "The compass you have will guide us." Nina is stunned. That's not going to happen. The compass doesn't work underground. It only functions on the surface. The bigger problem is that the monsters can see in the dark. They track the carbon dioxide we breathe out, and they're much faster than us. Nina hesitates to enter the tunnel, but Will reassures her we'll only be in the tunnel for 45 seconds. With no other choice due to the long distance they've already traveled, Nina reluctantly agrees to move forward. The three of them enter the tunnel, switch on their flashlights, and begin advancing. Soon, they encounter a door welded shut, blocking their path. Their only option is to descend to the 7th level, which lies below the line, and walk there for 900 meters. Nina and Kitty are frightened, but Will insists, "Either we go down or we go back the way we came, and I'm not going back." He instructs them not to run while descending to avoid making noise that might attract the monsters. He also explains that running will tire them out, causing them to release more carbon dioxide and increasing the chances of being detected. Carefully, they descend the stairs to the 7th level and begin moving slowly. After covering a short distance, they hear a noise behind them. They freeze, turn around cautiously, and discover a monster stalking. Without much thought, they start running, and Kitty throws a grenade at the monster in an attempt to slow it down. As they continued running, they passed by an old tractor on the path. They used the tractor to slow down the monster for a while, and then squeezed into a small hole in the wall to hide. They turned off their lights and held their breaths as much as possible to avoid the monster tracking their carbon dioxide. The monster extended its tail into the tunnel, sensing the air around it, while they struggled to hold their breaths. Later, Will lit a small flare to distract the monster and allow them to breathe for a moment. They eventually found a small exit and crawled through it. Kitty was the first to make it to the other side, but unfortunately, a monster was waiting for her. It attacked and killed her, dragging her body away. Will was devastated by her loss and broke down in grief. Afterward, he noticed a ladder leading to the 8th floor. They climbed it, and the monster's sounds began to fade. Finally, they found an exit and escaped the tunnel. Nina cried for Kitty, expressing her desire to avenge her. As they continued their journey, they found an old house with a car parked in front. They entered the house to spend the night. Inside, Will found a box of macaroni and cheese. He sat with Nina to eat, and during their meal, she said, "I love Tara so much, and I had started to care for Kitty too, but sadly, her fate was death." Will responded sorrowfully, "It's my fault. I should never have brought you along on this journey. It would have been better if we had climbed the mountains without any equipment." But Nina replied firmly, "Regret won't help you now. Keep your anger inside and use it to get revenge." Will then asked her about the contents of her lab. She told him that it contained magnesium blocks and explained, "The monster's skin is impenetrable. I believe it's because they are charged with electrical energy. If my theory is correct, any bomb or projectile coated with magnesium oxide could harm them." Will was impressed by this discovery as it gave him new hope. The next day, they set off in the car, speeding past the line and arriving in the abandoned city of Boulder. They entered the hospital to search for oxygen tanks, but Will couldn't find them easily, forcing them to spend a long time searching. Finally, when Will found the tanks, Nina shouted at him to hurry as the monsters were closing in. Will filled his bag with the tanks and ran quickly. Suddenly, a monster attacked them from behind the wall with its claws, blocking their path. They had to climb to the upper floor, but the monster extended its long arm and attacked them again. Nina found an axe and struck the monster with all her strength, freeing Will. She then filled the area with smoke to distract the monster, and they ran to another room. However, they found themselves trapped. The monster's beam appeared through the smoke, but disappeared after a few seconds. Suddenly, the monster appeared and charged at them with incredible speed. Will fired at the oxygen tanks, causing a massive explosion. The blast knocked the monster out of the window, and it fell outside. Both of them were shocked to realize that the monster was finally dead. As they exited the hospital, Nina told Will that her lab was very close and that she wanted to go there. However, Will was reluctant to take any more risks, especially since he had obtained the oxygen tanks and wanted to return them to Hunter as soon as possible. Nina tried to convince him, saying, "The oxygen tanks you have will keep Hunter alive for a year, but then you'll have to go on the same dangerous journey to get more, until the day comes when there are no tanks left to find. But if there's hope, and I can create a weapon to kill these monsters, the whole world will join us." Moved by her words, Will agreed to accompany her to the lab. They got in the car and headed to the lab. While back at the hospital, the monster they thought was dead began to stir back to life. They arrived at the lab, which was situated at an altitude of 5,867 feet. Nina told him she only needed 5 minutes to work. The compass wasn't detecting any monsters nearby. Will stood by the window, staying alert, and noticed a picture of Nina on the desk, realizing she had a husband and family. When Will spoke to Nina about her family, she tried to stay composed but broke down when she looked at the picture and started crying. She said, "I'm the only one in my family who survived. The day the monsters appeared, I was here in the lab, but my family was watching a soccer match. What hurts me the most is that I didn't even get to say goodbye to them. I'm sure you felt the same when you lost Tara." Will sympathized and replied, "I don't blame you anymore for what happened to my wife." Nina began working on the magnesium oxide compound she needed and coated a bullet with it to test her theory. She fired the bullet at the area the monster uses to defend itself, but unfortunately, the experiment failed. Still, Nina refused to give up and insisted on continuing her experiments. She asked Will to leave and let her continue on her own. Will didn't want to leave her alone, but she firmly refused and said, "I won't leave until I succeed or the monsters kill me. My car is still in the garage here. If I succeed, I'll be able to return to Lost Village later." Will couldn't convince her to come with him. At the same time, he didn't want to stay beyond the line for too long, as he needed to get back to Hunter. So, he took the car and drove off quickly. Nina continued her attempts and fired another bullet, but it was futile. She didn't notice that the compass had started to move, but she heard the sound of the monster getting closer. Realizing the danger, she quickly packed her things and ran into the forest, with the monster closing in on her. Meanwhile, Will was also trying to escape, but found another monster in front of him. He found himself surrounded by 3 monsters and began shooting at them in despair. It was useless. Suddenly, Nina appeared from behind and shot one of the monsters, killing it. She then shot the second and third monsters, saving Will's life in the nick of time. Will was overjoyed and looked at the remains of the monsters, only to discover that they weren't real creatures but machines. It became clear that someone had created them, explaining why they didn't sleep, eat, or behave naturally. They were programmed to act that way. However, they still didn't know who was behind their creation. Afterward, they walked together without fear as Nina had discovered a way to kill the monsters. They returned to Lost Village, where Will reunited with his son and embraced him tightly. At the same time, Nina raised a pirate flag as a symbol of triumph over the monsters. Everyone began to adopt Nina's method of using magnesium oxide-coated bullets to kill the monsters. Nina had also collected a large piece of one of the monsters for study. Meanwhile, a team was formed to venture beyond the line to hunt and eliminate more monsters. Please, if you like my content, support me with a like and subscribe to the channel. Have a nice day, friends.